What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Cinema Select. I am Ace, and today we are going to be talking about Takashi Miike's 1999 film, Dead or Alive. And this is basically the first installment of a loosely based trilogy. And you guys, honestly, this film is nothing short of incredible. And I mean that to the fullest extent of the definition. And yeah, this is going to be one of those films that are going to be eye-opening to a lot of you probably, and at least for the majority, it's going to be one that you don't forget. I will definitely say that. Now, earlier when I described this film, I called it incredible, which spectacular, hard to believe, eye-catching in a dramatic way. And I think that is honestly perfectly fitting for this type of film. If I had to describe it anyway, I would also call it violent and excessive. I would say thought-provoking, and at the same time, absolutely absurd in sometimes as well. And here's why. So, on its surface, Dead or Alive, and I would say maybe even at its core, it is a Yakuza action film. That is what it is. That's what you can at least expect going into. And it revolves around, our main story revolves around two characters who we pretty much follow up with. So on one end, we have the character Ryuichi, and this is a very cold-blooded, stoic gang leader, and he is played by Riki Takeuchi. And then on the other opposing end, we had Detective Jojima, played by Sho Aikawa, and who is equally as stoic, cold, maybe to a lesser extent, and if anything, I would say relentless. Absolutely relentless. And from the get-go, I mean, obviously there is some events that are happening in the world they dwell in, but we are kind of just dropped into the lives of these two men. We get little segments where we spend time with each one of them, seeing their surroundings, what they care about, their family life, kind of what drives them in a way, and what is leading them throughout the course of this movie. So both men acting and behaving by their own convictions, their own code, if you will, of what they deem as just, what they deem as right. Either one of them are so removed or passed beyond any type of peer pressure, or I don't want to say that both exactly act outside of the rules and laws of society, but I guess an example I would give is like where Ryuichi's character, obviously being the leader of his gang, he doesn't think very much of society and its rules. He thinks that, he doesn't owe anybody anything, and so therefore he can, be justified in taking what he needs to survive. And on the other end of it, we have Detective Jojima, who, at the same time, obviously he's there to uphold a law, but when you live in a world that is as corrupt, and there might be maybe not what we would call official laws, there's other laws that are placed that everybody else is willing to abide by. He is not. He will not be shaken, if you will. Now, one thing, as you can probably imagine, as we are getting segments going back and forth between these two men's lives, seeing their ups and downs, there is this gradual build-up to the ever inevitable build up to their clash. These two men living on two sides of the coin, they are gonna clash. And so in all essence, we, the audience, we are pretty much just here to bear witness to the ever enclosing spectacle of the climax, pretty much. And I say spectacle, a visually striking performance or display. Now that I think about it, the word spectacle describes the beginning of the film so appropriately. The beginning of this movie is absolutely insanity in its pace and editing, but at the same time coherent and somewhat smart in assisting with the film's narrative. And let me explain how that makes sense. There is a montage of events shown to us that feel like a rush of violence, sex, drugs, excess, brutality. I mean, I can just keep going on and on. It's grimy to the core, sleazy, and the first time you see it, you're kind of filled with this like shock and unfamiliarity that you can't help but utter, "What the fuck am I getting myself into?" Now, crazy thing is, after watching the film a second time and kind of like listening to the commentary track, it struck me that what I thought was just a chaotic mess of shock value being thrown in my face is actually context. Here, the director, Takashi Miike, is feeding me context to the events of what's about to take place in this film. He's showing me the main cast and the characters I will be following. He's giving me key story elements that the rest of the movie and plot will kind of like revolve around. And he's also kind of giving me setting, or like an idea of my bearings of where we're at in this movie. He's providing me with a look into this ugly, insane world. He's giving me all of this in the form of a fever dream. I mean, it's absolutely, at least for me, I don't think I've had a movie just inject us so rapidly with some context. Miike, what are you doing? You madman. You absolutely mad son of a bitch. Now, the film does resort to more of a conventional style of editing for the most part, and one of the observations that I have to agree with made in the commentary track that I mentioned earlier is Takashi Miike's excellent use of balancing, not just in his editing style, but kind of in the world that he has created for us, because it is a fantastically brutal world, and there are plenty of moments of absurdity, and yet there is some real societal issues and questions the movie brings up that for me are incredibly relatable, and for others at least real enough to be invested in and feel the weight of the stakes the movie presents us with. It's a very fine line that Miike is writing, allowing the audience to stay grounded while giving us spurts of insanity. It's sanity, extreme foolishness, or irrationality. And let's just gotta say, this movie's got plenty of that. So I do mean a lot of it. I mean, we're talking everything from arms being self-amputated, men dressed as giant chickens being shot up with hundreds of bullets, hands being perfectly fried and turned into a form of tonkatsu. So that is also a scene in this movie. I'm telling you, this movie is crazy, and yet don't be fooled, because this is a movie involving Yakuza, gangs, dirty cops, and so these are not good people. So as you can imagine, and maybe it's maybe I'm being repetitive, but the world we get in, yeah, there's laughs, but there is also a real, just harsh, brutal, and I use that word brutal a lot as of now, but harsh, brutal, and just gruesome events that you're going to be bearing witness to in this film. This film does at some points make you just feel kind of grimy or dirty, you know? Yeah, I think at one point I would even describe it as repulsive. The movie emphasizes things like vomiting, blood, feces even, betrayal, drug usage, and sex. I mean, I bring this up because before deciding to enter into this movie, you know, because, hey, this kind of content material is not for everyone. You know, not everybody is going to receive these things as casually as maybe the next viewer. So just be warned, just kind of throwing it out there that, yeah, you're going to be seeing a lot of this movie. And with Takashi Miike's kind of just lightning fast and chaotic way of presenting it, it could be a lot. It could definitely be a lot. So just kind of warning you guys there. Now, I will say though, within all of this madness, you're going to find characters who experience real heartfelt loss, dealing with themes such as relationships deteriorating, or maybe even like things like one's own identity, with characters kind of reflecting on who they are in society, what role they play, what they believe defines that role. Oh yeah, this movie also kind of touched bases on a concept that was new to me. If I'm pronouncing this right, it sounds like it would be called Nikke, which essentially kind of stands for like Japanese immigrants, or like second generation of a mixed nationality. And yeah, there is actual questions of pretty much these people, their struggle with identity, how they identify themselves or where they see themselves. There's even a side character who even makes this statement just out, you know, just plain out as dialogue. He says, we look Japanese, but we are not. And then shortly after, he says, we look Chinese, but we are not. So I don't know. I mean, I do think it's intentional, just because some of the gang that we follow seem to have some Chinese background. There is obviously dealings with the Chinese, I don't know if they're triad or Chinese gang that is working with the Yakuza. And then Ryuichi himself being a character that feels outcasted because of his mixed nationality, or because of his place in society. And so, yeah, there's a lot of this constant reoccurring theme of being mixed, or at least having an uncertain identity, nothing concrete, you know, one side rejecting you, the other side not being familiar with you, and vice versa. And as a Chicano, although not exactly the same, there is a lot of familiarity. I can definitely, for me, that was something that really struck me and I could relate to. I could, that kind of feeling. It reminds me, there's a very famous poem by a Chicano activist called I Am Joaquin. It's by Corky Gonzalez. And if you guys ever want context, I would highly encourage you to check it out. But regardless, though, that was something that I did not expect to find in this film, and yet here it was being presented to me underneath all of this, kind of violent, chaotic crime story, or Yakuza gang film. Very interesting. I was not expecting that, so that did throw me for a loop, but it was a surprise that I welcomed. I was very grateful for that. Now, I did want to say, guys, though, because I could go on that subject for a while now, but before I do, though, even though that I was noticing these elements, and I appreciate these elements of the film, these more societal kind of questions or deeper thoughts that are kind of in there, that is what they are on very surface level. Takashi Miike and this movie Dead or Alive, it doesn't dwell on them for very long. You're not going to get some in-depth deep dive into these issues. They are kind of just suggestive themes throughout. The main focus, I think, or at least what you're going to be really harping on in this film, are the characters themselves, the story itself, as far as like what they go through and how, like I mentioned earlier, Ryuichi and Detective Dojima will just inevitably gonna be at each other's odd ends, and they're gonna crash, which would be our climax. I think this also ties into the idea of what I was mentioning earlier about Takashi Miike's balancing. He's able to give us this outlandish kind of over-the-top world, but at the same time, though, keep us invested, keep us grounded to where we can, take the movie for its seriousness, at least as serious as the narrative wants. Well, and with that, I believe I've stated most of what I wanted to say about the film, and you guys, it is absolutely just a violent, entertaining experience. It's a roller coaster of a movie, and I would say honestly, it's well worth checking out. You absolutely will not forget it after watching it. There's no way. And and if you're curious about Takashi Miike's work, I'm sure you've probably heard of several of his other films. I know, like The One Missed Call or Audition, the Black Society trilogy. But if you are not familiar with Takashi Miike's work and you're kind of curious about it, I would say you really can't go wrong with Dead or Alive. I think this is a nice little showpiece, and it's, like I said, it's one wild ride that you definitely will not forget. If you guys are interested or curious, I've kind of said my piece already about the film, but I did want to say why this film, or why I chose this film, or how it even became on my radar. This film was always a mystery to me. I remember, I didn't always have, the resources, and the world was different, back in, 2008-ish, 2009-ish even, compared to now. I'm not saying that Japanese cinema wasn't accessible, but like if you're like a high school student or, really didn't have access to the internet a lot besides like school, library even, I found this clip. I think it was deemed like the best ending of the movie, the best ending of any movie, and it was absolute insanity. Crazy but awesome. Me being a younger guy, thinking, wow, this is really awesome, but I have no idea what this is. And it wouldn't be until much years later that I found out that it's from a movie called Dead or Alive, released back in the late 90s, and by a director named Takashi Miike. And since then, I just waited and bided my time to see, like, okay, when can I see this movie? And essentially Arrow Video, I think, is the ones that released the trilogy, which I didn't even know there was a trilogy of it until later, of all three movies. And so I got it, and I am so glad that I now know the full context of that infamous ending scene. Maybe a lot of you have seen that ending scene on YouTube. I think the original video that I saw, all those years back, is still there. But yeah, just a little kind of context or fun little story of how I saw this just ridiculous and hilarious like ending to a film, and yet I had no idea, the rest of it. I almost was in disbelief that was an actual ending to a real movie. But yeah, there it was, and that just kind of goes to the testament of Takashi Miike. Don't know what to expect. So, yeah. Thoroughly enjoyed the film. I hope you guys do as well if you do check it out. Well, and thank you guys so much for listening to me and joining me on our little discussion about Dead or Alive by Takashi Miike. And I'm curious. Down in the comments, leave what are your guys' take? Have you seen this movie? Are you curious about it? Is there any other Takashi Miike films that you guys really do appreciate? And like I said, leave that down below. As always, if you like what you saw here and want to see more, don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, click the bell as well. And definitely, I will be back later with some more Cinema Select and some other videos in the future. Whether that's Track Batch or me and the guys are kind of thinking about for future podcast episodes as well. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much for joining me here at Dark Purple Gold Roses. As always, I'm Ace, and yes, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Wait till I do. We move at God's speed, our purpose is true. We move at God's speed, our purpose is true.